Mr. Ibrahim, we've heard from our previous speakers really emphasize on the issue of funding and financing. And we understand the fund seeks to help vulnerable communities to recover from climate-related loss as well as damages. Expectations from the fund are really very high. Can you please, first of all, share the latest on the operationalization of the fund, but also as the core convener of the high-level dialogue on loss and damage? What, according to you, were its main highlights? How do you see the role of DRR in complementing the fund's effort? So all eyes are on you.
Well, Fatu, the deal you and I had coming from the same country, you're going to ask me an easy question, give me 2 hours to make my point. And let me just use this opportunity. First of all, this is the first time I'm sitting on a panel that everyone on the panel is actually connected to the fund that I run. To my left, Carla and I have the responsibility of making sure the countries are ready to access our funding. To my right, Vanuatu, this is the country that we work for in supporting them. France play a major leadership in our fund, both at the board but also contribution. And obviously IFRC will be a great partner in implementing the work we'll be doing. And that is why partnership is extremely critical in what we do. Let me make 2 important points. First of all, a little bit on the problem as we see it. And maybe share with you some of the key pillars that I see to be part of the solution so we can enhance responding in responses to loss and damage across the most vulnerable countries. Just prior to this meeting, I had a very insightful discussion with the Minister of Disaster Management of Somalia. He spent a great deal of time sensitizing me about the impact of loss and damage in this country and the impact it has on the most vulnerable communities. And about 10 days ago, I was in Nepal and had a conversation with the government, with a similar exercise trying to sensitize me to the impact of loss and damage in the mountains and flooding. And about a few months ago, I was in Barbados looking at the damage of Hurricane Beryl and the impact it has on the country. Now, what all these disasters have in common with regard to loss and damage is a human face. The people that are affected, whose life are affected. So this is not just technicalities, it affects the life of many people. It's important as we discuss some of the solutions we think about also the people that expect so much from us and we can't disappoint them. In my view, the solutions is a long list of what I call the key pillars. Number 1, and as we heard from Vanuatu, and this is something we believe as a fund, anything we do has to be country-led. The countries know the problem they face with, and so therefore, by empowering them to share their needs and the demand, it's our way of building sustainable solution in dealing with loss and damage. I think second, our fund is a great example of what you can achieve through global solidarity. And about a few years ago, when this fund was announced to be operationalized, many were doubtful. In less than a year, we're able to not only get pledges up to $766 million, we're able to actually have a host of the fund, but more importantly, have a secretary that I run, and now we're talking about obviously supporting the countries as well. But that global solidarity got us to where we are, but that global solidarity is needed for us to get to the next level, and that is to highly capitalize the fund so we can get into the billions, so we can actually support the countries because the demand is huge. The third pillar is we have to talk and walk to walk. In other words, we at the fund strongly believe that out of the funding that we have mobilized so far, we need to begin to engage and support the countries. And that is why our board, about a few months ago, made a commitment to allocate about $250 million to support the most vulnerable countries, looking at extreme weather conditions, slow onset, but I see in the winter when some of the audiences I can stated the importance of rapid response, because that's how you save life, and that is the way we're going to look at the early interventions. I think the fourth part of the solution is that it is extremely critical to recognize not one institution alone can do this to be impactful. And that's why it's going to be a combination of actors. And that's the reason why at the spring meeting in the World Bank, we decided under the leadership of the board to launch what we call a high-level dialogue, so we can bring all the players around the table and begin to have a conversation whereby the solution may come from different sources, and together, holistically, we can support the country as long as what we provide as the support is country-led, bottom-up, so that Vanuatu, what we do as a fund is actually relevant to your needs. And the last 2 points I want to make is that it is extremely critical to recognize the civil society, the indigenous group, who are at the forefront on a daily basis, looking at the challenges in dealing with loss and damage in the field. They should be part of the solution. That's why in our board, as we actually discuss the fundamentals of the fund, we consult with civil society and make sure their voices are heard, and that is also the way we're approaching loss and damage as well. Let me wrap up by saying I've been struggling with what does success look like? To me, it's a combination of things. Number one, we have to be impactful and make sure that when we mobilize these resources, they're actually relevant to the problem of the country we're supporting. And that's why I look forward to us providing support to the most vulnerable countries, particularly the seeds and the LDCs, who are demanding for the fund to really respond to the needs as quickly as possible. I think second, there is no point of announcing billions of dollars that are not accessible. And that is why any fund, including ours, has to be nimble, accessible, flexible, so that countries and those that we're trying to support, they don't have to take forever to access our funding. Last but not least, partnership, partnership, partnership. As I started, everyone on this panel is part of the solution. And I believe if you join our forces, we may be able at least to be relevant to the countries we're trying to support, so that going back to the human phase, no one is left behind. Thank you.
The first question from the audience is, what is the outlook for additional pledges to the fund? What will sustain funding to the fund itself? So,
well, let's start with where we are today in actually honoring the pledges and the commitment made across the 2-3 COPs. It was about $766 million coming from 27 contributors, and 22 out of the 27 have signed a contribution agreement, and 19 of them have released their commitment to the fund, including France to my right. So if you look at that trend, that means at least countries are actually honoring their commitment, and that is why we're able to use the early contribution that we get to launch the early intervention of the fund. Now, as I said earlier, it's certainly not enough, but we need to start demonstrating from what we have our ability to respond to the needs and the demand as Vanuatu or other countries that are also vulnerable. So while we're doing that, and we've been also looking at the longer-term resource mobilization, whereby in addition to the public money, as Bernard said earlier, what else is out there available? What is philanthropy, private sector, or maybe other ways of mobilizing resources? But it is very important, while we're mobilizing the billions, we also have to make sure what we have so far is actually impactful, but also support the countries as they need them. It is also important, and I mentioned earlier, what I call the AAA of climate finance: affordability, accessibility, and availability of funding. I think what I hear from the countries, they do not want to hear billions of dollars that are not accessible to those who need them the most, and that's why, as far as we're concerned, we're looking at the lesson that we learned from other funds with regard to accreditation, lesson that we can learn in terms of the system that's put in place to make sure countries have access to the funding, But more importantly, our focus, it's not on the bureaucracy of administrative fund. Our focus is providing funding where it's needed so that we can claim, thanks to our funding, thanking to all the intervention, we've saved lives, rebuilt the infrastructure, and we are relevant to the country's needs the most, and that's why the expectation is such. The faster we move to actually intervening and less mobilizing resources, the more we can claim that our fund is like being impactful. So the next time I see one or two at the meeting, I can look him in the eyes, and I've been able to at least make a difference in your country, and that's where we want to be.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Diong. We really hope all those things are actually achieved, as well as ensuring the fund is really being utilized the most, but also bringing in more funding for these countries, as you've mentioned. What is a practical example where the San Diego Network and the Lost and Damaged funding could work together? So how can Ibrahim, how can Carolina actually work together? One example, concrete example in 30 seconds.
30 seconds or 2 hours?
No, 30 seconds.
Well, the good news is we actually have signed a letter of intent, decide to work together. So that's a good starting point. We're formalizing our relationship. I think second, there are two scenarios. And one, countries will approach us. They're ready and bring us proposals that we can consider because the quality of the proposal is such. We could look at the base on our funding criteria. But there may be possibilities where countries will approach it with something that requires using the readiness support from Santiago Network. So that way we can increase the level of the portfolio, the quality of what we look at. And I think eventually it's going to be a very dynamic process between Santiago Network and ourselves, because ultimately the focus is not on us, the focus is in the countries we're helping. As long as we can provide the solutions, that's all we care about. The rest is something internal within our institutions.
Definitely. So the solution is what you care about.